D, let's put that at like 4. So personnel policy, put that to 4. Take 4, 5.
Yeah.
Then add that one would be 6.
We don't even have another, we don't even have time for other today.
Not even on there?
We don't
Just-
normally put
no.
other. 6 is.
Discuss proposal. Just ask them. Just equipment front areas.
Yeah, it looks all new. No, I would guess. I mean, not, it's, you can get used equipment, but it's. I mean, and there might be some used, but everything I get. I'd almost want to maybe go check it out. These machines, that's new.
Pull this up. Move it to number 4. Then 4 will become 5, and then 6 would be discussed at list of assets. Does that make sense? Okay.
This.
Am I supposed to mind the right spot? I guess I didn't even look.
Yeah.
Oh, that's on
Let's call the meeting to order. This time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board come up to the microphone and state their name and address for the record. We would also like to ask that speakers refrain from using. Board is interested. If you desire response to a specific question, you may request it. This evening, each speaker will be allowed a maximum of 3 minutes. As a point of order, if any speaker wishes to talk later in the agenda, comments are limited only to the agenda item at hand, and the speakers must first be recognized by only the Fargo Park Board President before coming to the microphone. Otherwise, the speaker may be ruled out of order. The Fargo Park Board President, however, does not have to engage in dialogue. We ask that you respect this request and act accordingly. So we have recognized the audience. Does anyone want to make a public comment? Okay, so we're going to take a look here. Is this the right place for to take a look at the consent agenda? Because there have been some changes.
Yeah, Madam President. Madam President, we would like to pull item D off the consent agenda, which is the personnel policies. We have transgender staff policy number 105, outside employment policy number 210, vacation policy number 230, leave of absence policy number 260, holidays policy number 300, and social networking policy number 510. And we'd like to pull that off the consent agenda and move that to item number 4. So that would be the first change. And then we also have another to add as item number 6.
So we're making that 4, and obviously 4 is now becoming 5?
Yeah, 4 would become 5. Board to consider approval award of construction management at-risk services for phase 2. That would be item number 5. And then for item number 6, we had a late entry to our agenda, and that would be discuss proposal to purchase assets from Kelly Visto for the Rose Creek facility restaurant. So, Madam President, that would be our suggested changes.
Someone like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the changes?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Okay, I'll second it.
Favor. Or we don't need to.
We do, because there's
Aye.
bills.
Yes.
Because of the bills. Okay. Dave?
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the director's report.
Thank you, Madam President, and I believe Brock Leitz is online. Can you confirm that, Brock?
Hold on, do we
Oh.
need to move on the consent agenda? We just, we agreed to the new agenda, but then don't we still have to vote on the consent agenda?
So
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
was the first motion to approve the changes to the agenda?
Correct.
Is that way you wrote it, Jeff?
I can.
No, that's not the way I
That's
said it.
not the way it was said,
That's not the way
so.
I said
No.
it. I said to approve the consent agenda with the changes.
Okay, my misunderstanding.
Okay, so we got it.
We're
I
good.
think we're
We're good.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, we'll get back to the director now.
Okay, thanks, Madam President. Mr. Brock Leitz, are you online?
Yes, I am. Can you guys all hear me?
Yes, we can. Would you like to
All
start
right.
the director's report?
Sure. Thanks, Dave. Good evening, Commissioners. Sorry I was unable to get there in time, but hopefully this will work out for us. So briefly, in the area of HR, finance, and IT, the coming out of the benefits fair, that was very successful for our employees. Great job by the Human Resources Department in putting that on, and all of our vendors. Our employees are now in the process of open enrollment. I believe that opened today. Stacy is there and can likely confirm. I know that employees have been making meetings with the HR team and getting their benefits signed up for the coming year. So that's always a good effort that needs to get done and beneficial for our employees. You'll see coming up, so the finance area is starting the process of working toward the audit. You'll see at next month's meeting, we'll be talking about that initial audit letter, but certainly that process starts very early as we're working with Eide Bailey and just starting to get rolling on some of the things that need to happen between now and year end, and then get rolling into that audit. And we'll cover that more in the next month's meeting, but efforts are underway already in that regard. And then in the IT side, we had been very excited about adding a network administrator, which is going to help us. It's a new position that was budget neutral for us and was going to help us reduce our reliance on our third-party vendor, as we're going to bring some of those resources in-house. Unfortunately, we got word just this week, yesterday, that that individual has since not been able to take that position, and we're working with the HR team to get that open again and really try to continue to work on bringing more of our IT services in-house for our employees, and we'll just continue that effort much as we had previously. So unless there are any questions, that would conclude my report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brock. And starting out my very far left, we will move to Miss Carolyn Botain.
Good evening, Commissioners. For my report, first I want to invite everybody to the Yonker Farm Public Input Meeting. That will be Thursday night. That is going to be held at Broadway Station from 6 till 8 p.m. It is an opportunity for Norris Design to give a 10-15-minute presentation about what they've discovered so far and what they've heard so far, and then invite folks to participate in different stations and give us their feedback on what Yonker Farm has been, what it can be. Again, this is for the whole 55 acres, which currently houses the Yonker Farm Family Farmhouse, the Botanical Garden Society, over 200 community gardens, the dog park, and a number of other participant stakeholders. And so again, this is the first public meeting. After this, they will then gather this input and continue on in making some additional recommendations and plans as to how what we've discovered as 20 acres of really unprogrammed space can be used in addition to the current uses that are there. So again, that is Thursday night this week, 6 to 8 p.m. at Broadway Square, 1641 North Broadway. Otherwise, an update on Rose Creek and the restaurant.
Can I
yeah.
ask a question? Do you have any news about the animal clinic that's on the site?
Animal clinic, or do you mean the Homeward Bound shelter?
Yes, the shelter.
I know that Norris Design with Bill Maher has met with Tasha Tasha Haug, and they have had a conversation. She's also got an invitation to participate on Thursday night as well. Any other questions about the Yonker Farm Master Plan? Then Rose Creek Restaurant, we have had 6 interested parties. I've given 5 tours. We've talked with Kelly Visto, who was the Big Herbs owner. He is not interested in putting in a proposal, but as we have added to our agenda tonight, he does have some equipment there he'd like us to consider purchasing. So we'll have that discussion later. In my tours with the interested parties, they are very much interested in a turnkey operation. They're not looking at making major changes. And so that's where any additional equipment, any additional amenities that we can provide to make it a simple one-to-one agreement, they would be very interested in. We are in the process of putting the RFP together, and that's another reason why it'd be nice to have a decision on the equipment tonight so that I can let people know so that they can give us their proposals by the middle of December, and then we can have something to consider and possibly have them moving in January so that we can hit our April 1 expected start date for the golf season. So any questions on where or what we might have had discussions there? If not, thank you very much. That's my report.
Thank you, Carolyn. Moving down to Carolyn's right, we have Brian Arrett.
Good evening, board members. In recognition that this is my second to last meeting, I've invited a couple of people here to get used to this experience of talking to all of you. So first, I'm going to invite Craig Buer, who is now the foundation director, up to talk a bit about what's going on with the foundation. And when he's done, then Paul Grindland, who's been named as my replacement, will come up and talk about VSS and our desperate need for volunteers. So Craig, go ahead.
Thank you, commissioners. Just an update on the foundation. We've had a busy year in 2022. Lots of changes with the hiring of an executive director. We're in the process right now of hiring our administrative assistant. We had some great candidates. We'll be offering that position here very soon. We are actively campaigning for both the Fargo Park Sports Complex and Island Park Pool. I have numerous potential donors we're meeting with currently, so lots of activity on the campaign side. And just an update for the year of 2022, we are up to $9.8 million raised, and we're certainly goals set to get over 10 million here before the end of the year, which we're confident we'll be able to accomplish. We will plan to present an annual report at the December Park Board meeting, just to review kind of the highlights of the year. Lots of partnerships that we can celebrate, and to get to that $10 million mark would be a great accomplishment, with lots of help from our volunteer foundation board. And also we'll be gearing up for Giving Hearts Day. We'll be on February 9th this year. As you remember, last year, the Fargo Park District Foundation was the #1 fundraiser for Giving Hearts Day. Great team effort from our foundation board marketing team. So we hope to be in that realm again. That's certainly the goal. So lots of planning on that side, and we're excited to get going on that. So any questions for me on the foundation update?
I was wondering about the Giving Hearts Day. Is that something that's relatively new to the Park District, isn't it?
Yes, this will be our 3rd year that we've been involved with Giving Hearts Day. And just a tremendous day, of course, for our region, and we're excited to be a part of it. We've certainly learned a lot over the last couple of years, and it's been just a great vehicle for us to get our mission out there and to get people excited to be a part of our community projects. And we plan to be in it for many years. It's been a fantastic day and an exciting day to be a part of it. And Brian can attest to that with VSS and the foundation as well.
And to clarify, the Fargo Parks Foundation has participated 3 years, but Valley Senior Services has participated longer, right?
Yeah, I think this is our 7th year coming up.
So in the last 3 years, then what has been the increase in the amount of funds that have been received?
Okay, so I think in our first year we were at, I want to say around 75,000, give or take. Last year we had an anonymous donor step forward with $1 million match. and we were able to match just nearly 1.4 million in total that day. So we're hopeful we can find another match this year. It's a great incentive, of course, for people to feel like, you know, they're doubling their money for a great cause. So we're going to set our goals high again this year. We have some people we've reached out to that saw the success of last year. I think are excited to maybe partner with us in that way again. So yeah, we're excited. It's going to be another big day.
So we went up by a factor of about 20 from year 1 to year 2. If we do that again, we'll raise $28 million.
I love the optimism.
That's on public record now.
Now, Brian,
I'm
because somebody in this room won't have a full-time day job at that point on February 9th, I'm expecting a volunteer spot to be
Oh, volunteer.
filled in.
Oh. Good luck.
Brian's good on camera, so we'll see. If he's up for that. Any other questions for the foundation?
Maybe want to talk about what we discussed today with the kind of the structuring of how that might look going forward.
So we had our foundation meeting this afternoon. I got a site tour of the sports complex, which is very exciting to walk through that space, even on the cold, brisk winter day. So, you know, as we've grown as a foundation, I think a natural step would be to consider, we're at 7 board members right now for the foundation. Our goal is to get to 9. And at this time, we're looking at kind of restructuring that with different committees, different focus points. We have such a talented foundation board. Something I've heard is, you know, put me in a spot to really focus on something that I can really help. So we took that advice. At the December meeting, we'll come forward with a recommendation for maybe a 3-committee structure moving forward. So yeah, I think it's a natural step for us moving forward. And again, we have great talent on that board, and we look forward to great things in 23.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
Paul?
Hey, commissioners. Is this where I can ask for money too?
The reason we appreciate you, Paul, is because you always come asking if you could spend your own money.
I can say that because I never ask for money.
You always break even.
So as we transition, Brian and I are working on the transition. We'll be hitting that pretty hard in December. I'm finishing up myself some transit duties that I need to finish before I start doing more training with Brian. But currently VSS, we're working on 2 staff positions. One is my replacement for the transit manager, and that job is open through November 18th on Friday. And then we are looking at a possible job offer or creating a job for an intern that we have right now that we're really happy with, and we'd like to keep that intern on after he graduates. So we're working on that position. We had a VSS Inc. board meeting this morning. And there I reported on the Metro Senior Ride Service. Our ridership is up 30% to this point in 2022 over 2021. So rides are coming back after COVID.
To pre-COVID?
Yeah, it's not quite pre-COVID levels yet, 2019 and earlier. So we're still have some work to do, but we're excited that all our transit services are up along with meals. And we discussed our foundation. We put a letter in our newsletter, a 1-page, talking about our VSS Inc. Foundation and the ways that people can give gifts to VSS, either our FM Area Foundation Fund or Dakota Medical Foundation Fund, or to Giving Hearts Day in February. In December, I'll be bringing our transit funding request to the board, so I'll be here again talking about that. And I think that's all I have to report right now.
Brian, you better train them early on this one.
Just a little bit more information on nutrition. We're 7% above where we were a year ago. So numbers for nutrition, which went up during COVID by about 15%, continue to go up now. So 7% is where it looks like we're going to be at the end of this year. Always looking for more volunteers. The phone number, if you'd like to volunteer to help deliver Meals on Wheels, is 293-1440.
Okay.
Thank you all so
Paul,
much.
What was that
I
number
was
again?
teasing Brian, not you.
293.
That's kind of a standing,
293-1440.
standing thing
Thank
for
you.
us is we
Yeah,
might as well
get
get
used to
Meals
this
on Wheels
kind of
out there.
treatment, Paul. It's gonna, I'm sure it's gonna
I'm
continue.
used to it.
Equal opportunity.
That's
you.
all we have unless there's questions. Thank you. Thanks, Paul
Thank
and
you.
Craig.
So you had mentioned needing volunteers. Are we doing okay or we're
We're desperate.
really
No,
short? or
we are
we're-
doing pretty well with volunteers. It's certainly, there's kind of a transition that happens when the weather starts to
Sure.
change. You know, people go south, people are not as comfortable driving, you know, when it's slippery or cold out. So we'll always be looking for more volunteers during this time of year.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Paul. Next up on our list, Dave Beats.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening, Commissioners. Just to give you a little idea of what the Parks Department has been up to since the last time we have met and were debriefed on this. You can tell the weather's changed outside, so our folks the last several days have been busy clearing snow and moving into our winter operations. If you've driven by Broadway Square in the last 2 days, you've seen a real hub of activity down there. Our crews today, just this afternoon, installed the Christmas tree down there. So that's up and ready. Our crews are also installing the rink, the ice rink. Our goal for the ice rink is to have ice ready by next Tuesday when the tree lighting ceremony happens. And so hopefully the weather will cooperate. If we do get a snowfall, we have to take those resources in the terms of people and clear snow first. So that derails us a little bit from making ice. And then another update with the holiday season, the tree will be inserted at Row Farm on Thursday. And we'll continue to decorate at Row Farm, getting ready for Santa Village, which starts on the 26th. So that's what folks are busy right now. To give you an update a little bit on some of our major projects that we started this year and have been working towards, the Osgood Slope Repair Project was able to wrap up last week before the weather turned. We do have some things that'll have to be done in the spring, such as reseeding and things of that nature, but the bulk of the work we got in, thankfully, before the weather really turned on us. So that turned out better than what we had anticipated. And then our concrete project, which was rather extensive this year. And if you remember, we received that grant early in the year from the state of North Dakota. That too wrapped up. All the concrete got poured. We do have some backfilling yet to do at Trollwood and on Rose Creek, where we redid a path on Rose Creek. That work will have to take place in the spring. So at Trollwood, we'll have limited areas that we plow there this year, just because, you know, with all the fresh dirt and not getting dirt backfilled up against the concrete, we're going to close portions of that trail. So if you do hear comments about that, you know, send them our way. But that's the reason why we won't be plowing certain portions of that, just because that work will have to conclude in the spring. So any questions you might have, I'd be happy to answer them.
When do you pour the other outdoor rinks?
You know, great question. We need temperatures to be about 10 degrees or colder. And then the big caveat there is, again, with no snow.
So some people are hoping we never pour them and other people want them tomorrow.
And we're already getting folks calling in and asking when they'll be ready. And so, yeah, we need a period of about 12 days, 10 degrees or colder is ideal, and then without snow. And we have a prioritization list. Obviously, the work that's involved in getting the Broadway Square rink going, it takes a lot of resources to do that. So that's our primary focus. And not to say we're not, you know, doing some work already on the outdoor ones, but the weather in the next few days looks very favorable, where we'll start putting some water down. And again, it'll just determine on what type of weather we get before we can get them ready to open.
And now that we have the white stuff, when do we start working on grooming trails and those kinds of things?
Great question. We've had a lot of those calls too in the last couple of days. We need about 6 inches of snow to make a good base. Our crews are out there doing a preliminary packing, is what we call it, where they just kind of set the base of the trail. Many instances, skiers and snowshoers have already been out. And in some areas where we don't quite have enough snow, we're just staying off, because quite honestly, the trail they're making now with the limited snow is actually better than what we can do. So we don't want to, mess that up for them, but we really need about 3 or 4 more inches of snow before we can really start to set our classic trails and our skating trails.
I want to thank you guys for moving the entrance, quote unquote, for Lindenwood and leaving the gate open. I think that's going to be a game changer, adding parking spots so people aren't trying to pile up in that open area where there isn't enough parking. And barricading it off this year, so hopefully nobody goes down the path like we saw last year. So my question from that is, will people be able to access the skiing from where they can park or near where they can park?
They will. We're adding a trail spur there, a trailhead, if you will, right off of the edge of that parking area that we'll keep clean all winter. So we agree. We think that's a good move to, have folks to be able to get further into Lindenwood than we have in the past. There's a lot of activity, that ski trail and snowshoeing and even just people in there normally walking or birding. There's a lot of activity that happens in Lindenwood throughout the winter. And so for us to be able to move some of that parking traffic further into the park, I think is a real plus.
So will you be plowing the first parking lot where the ball diamonds are, or the parking lot where we do pond hockey? Or the third one where the Rotary?
Where the Rotary
Playground
is
is.
our plan.
Okay.
And that's where we'll have people be able to get in that far to the Rotary playground area. And then, of course, when the pond hockey season comes, we'll have that lot open as well. And we just won't maintain that on an ongoing basis after pond hockey, but, through the course of those 3 or 4 weeks, we'll make sure that's accessible as well.
Got it. Thank you. I think
Yes.
that's going to be a nice winter addition.
Yep.
Just checking, do you have one more tree to do too that you didn't mention? Is that right? The one in Island Park?
In Island Park, yep, those decorations will be going up this week as well. So hopefully we can get all of that concluded this week and have all of the decorating done across the district.
So there are 3 trees, is that right?
There are,
Okay.
yep. And the one in Island Park is it's a growing tree that's live there. The one at Roll Farm is a live tree that we take donations every year from around the community and insert there. And then, of course, the Broadway Square tree is an artificial tree.
Equal opportunity treeing.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Side question, how many ski trails or areas do we have?
Boy, you're catching me there. I would say we've got about 6 areas that we have that. We offer that in all of our nature parks in the south end of town, and of course then the Red River Trail area, Edgewood. Yeah, I would say 5 or 6
Of the
locations.
ski, not the classic, right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, I hear from more and more people about that.
I've had somebody ask me about it and I was like, okay. And
It's gaining in popularity. We hear that a lot. We deal a lot with the local ski groups, and then, the school district all have teams. And so that's gaining in popularity from what we understand and what we hear.
All right, thank you, Dave. Just a couple quick updates from myself. I'll give you a pool update since Kevin wasn't able to be here today. The design team is working through the final stages of the design phase process. It's not as exciting as a schematic design because we're not seeing a lot of new and cool stuff. It's kind of checking the locks, the bolts, reaffirming spaces and concessions and doors and mechanical things like that. So they're going to wrap that up. Then they'll move into the construction document phase, and then we'll be able to get this project bid out after the first of the year. Actually, at the November facilities and December board meeting, we'll be asking for permission from the commissioners to bid this project. So that'll be coming up. Regarding the, David mentioned on the Christmas tree down at Broadway Square. So just a reminder, all the commissioners, that we do have that Christmas tree lighting event set for next Tuesday. And that was a great event last year. Hopefully we'll have some nice weather, and we'll obviously have some nice white surroundings. So look forward to that next Tuesday. Regarding the sports complex update, we did have a tour down there with our foundation board, and we did have a couple commissioners that were able to attend that along with some staff. And so that was good to see. If anytime any commissioners you weren't able to attend, you want to from now until next April, you want to go out and do a tour, just feel free to give me a call. And if I can't make it, I'll make sure we line somebody up. McGough has always been very good at allowing us to come out there and take tours whenever we'd like. So we still do have some tours lined up on the docket if you want to try to make one of those. But regarding the sports complex, we are kind of finishing up, or we're just getting into the schematic design phase of phase 2. And phase 2 consists of the 2 additional ice sheets, 6 pickleball courts, playground, 4 birthday party rooms, 2 community rooms, and the 4 basketball courts. So we're working on the schematic design on that. We should have some drawings later this week. And once we have those, I had talked to Kevin this morning about setting up a meeting with the 2 user groups, the hockey groups, so we can review those plans with them. They gave us some kind of basic parameters of what they're looking for in an ice sheet, seating for 200, locker rooms that are typical of Cornerstone Bank Arena. So we did have some initial meetings with the design team and looked at a couple different options. One of them had like a three-row stadia seating up on top, which was kind of nice to be able to look down into the rinks. One problem with that is it didn't allow us to have some additional ad alternate options for when we bid this project. So I think, or the direction we gave them was do a system similar to what we have at Cornerstone Bank, is where you come into the banks, you have that riser deck that you kind of walk in at the top of the boards with the glass in front of you, and then we'll have 3 rows of seating along the one side that'll get us to that, 160 to 200 seat viewing area there. And then our plan for ad alternates would be extension of the main concourse going north. I think there's 2 ad alternates on that. There's a shorter distance and a longer distance. There's a second story addition to that that'll be an ad alternate, and then the second floor mezzanine in the hockey or the ice sheet arenas, which would be similar to what we have at Cornerstone Arena. The one thing we're looking there, instead of having exposed to the elements, it would be a conditioned space where you maybe have walls and windows to look out in, so you'd have some tempered space for people to view. So we're going to have 2 options on that. One open to the ice temperatures, and one as an enclosed building. So that'll give us a lot of good options as we bid this project. As I mentioned at the foundation meeting today in the tour, is we want to have as many ad alternate options so that that base scope that we have of 2 sheets of ice, 4 hardwood courts, 6 pickleball, the playground, the community rooms, that we can get that entire scope without having to reduce scope. So I think we have a lot of options, a lot of paths forward, and as opposed to when we bid out the first phase of the project, while construction costs are still high, I think there's something that our construction managers have a handle on and can predict for the future. So I think we're in good shape there. So those are kind of my 2 updates, 3 updates, if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Dave.
All right. Thank you, Madam President. Commissioners.
Let's move on to agenda number 3. Tri-City United Soccer Club presentation. Lee Schwartz, Executive Director.
Please.
Could you advance it for me? Okay. First, Madam President, Council, staff, thank you for the opportunity to be here in front of you today. I'd like to introduce my Director of Operations, Carrie Wynn. Carrie, want to tell a little about yourself?
I'm a native. I lived in California for 8 years. I brought my soccer-loving husband back to the state, who introduced our children to soccer, which I had no experience with. And now I'm Director of Operations for the club. And one of my daughters is playing college soccer, and one of them is coaching soccer. So
I'm Lee Schwartz. First and foremost, I'm a Fargo kid. Carl, Ben, Agassiz, Fargo South, Warren State. I've crossed paths with some of you. In the past, I've worked at the Red Hawks and Shields Arena. I want to, if you see Dave Clute or Ben Franson in the building, please apologize to them for all the abuse they took as umpires when they were with when I was with the Red Hawks. So thanks again for the opportunity today. I'll be brief. So as Tri-City United is a nonprofit soccer club, we have about 3,000 families and about 4,000 kids in our program now. We're growing about 20% year over year. We're doing our very best to provide soccer for all and welcome every kid who wants to play soccer into our club, regardless of their ability to pay, regardless of their athletic ability or their background. We welcome kids as young as 18 months old and have programs for them all the way through high school. We work very hard to provide the best soccer training ground possible. We've had dozens of players move on from our programs to getting college scholarships, so we're doing our best on the competitive side, but we really try to be soccer for everyone. Like many nonprofits and many park districts, we are very challenged every day by being somewhat understaffed and somewhat underfunded. So, apologize for the font size on this slide. So for me, the biggest takeaways from these 8 things are these. We're the largest soccer community in North Dakota. We might just be the largest sports community in North Dakota. I'm not sure how big like Team Acres is or some of those, but I think we are the largest sports club of any kind in North Dakota. We're not an elitist affluent only club. We have 3,000 families, 4,000 kids. We're very much a cross section of the entire community in terms of income, in terms of diversity. We're probably one of the most diverse organizations anywhere in the region. As a nonprofit, we're providing a big service at the lowest price possible. We do our best just to break even year over year. We're also supporting our community every day by volunteering, by providing free camps, and making it a priority to care not just about how good they are at soccer, how good kids are at soccer, but really about their overall health. Really a direction we're moving toward is community health being bigger than just soccer health. Our club brings about $4 million in income to the city every year through our tournaments that we host, and those numbers are provided to us by the CVB. And I also be surprised we're probably not one of the largest renters, tenants, whatever you want to call us, to the park district here, and both in Moorhead and in West Fargo. So as I mentioned, we're trying not to just build a club. We're really trying to build a community. I'm a baseball guy. You guys maybe know that already, but you have to be impressed by the numbers of soccer players. And one thing that really impressed me when I came over was that it's quite a responsibility that we are likely going to be the first ball that a kid ever passes, or the first time they ever take a field anywhere with a teammate is going to likely be at one of our soccer fields. We have about 95% of the soccer players in Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo are playing in our club, and we accept that as a pretty big responsibility. We're trying to build a bigger community than just our club. We're trying to add soccer-themed events. We're creating World Cup watch parties. We're bringing soccer to low-income neighborhoods this next summer. We're going to set up free camps in city parks. We'd love to have your support and even have you partner with us to help build soccer culture throughout the region. At least throughout Fargo. We built Soccer Day last year. We kind of created this to be kind of our version of opening day for baseball and kind of our hockey day in Minnesota. We'd love it to get to that size someday. But what we wanted was a day that the community would recognize soccer has started in our community. Because again, we have so many families and so many kids participating that it is a pretty big deal. Our lobby at our building in South Fargo will soon be the future home of the North Dakota Soccer Hall of Fame as soon as we find a naming rights sponsor.
When is Soccer Day 2023?
So we picked one last year and we had to keep moving it. So we're going to be a little more careful about this year. We picked a date in late April. And then, as you maybe all know, none of us could be on the fields till about the first week of May last year. So we had to push it off a couple times. So we will time it. This last year we timed it, and we probably do the same thing again this year. We have a recreational program opening day as 1,000 kids playing in one day. And that's the day we'll probably try to coordinate with again this year. So
thank you.
So some of the challenges we're facing, as you know, running a really large building in 2022 is really, really expensive. Expenses for us really went through the roof last year, not just with utility costs, but I mean, just the fact that we had to pay coaches more, we had to pay referees more, all the same things that you guys face as well. One thing that we struggle with is Fargo admittedly still not really a soccer town. We don't have this endless supply of soccer coaches. We don't have an endless supply of soccer referees. So one thing that we've really been trying to do is, so to speak, grow our own. We really are setting up programs and getting programs in place now for recreational coaches to become competitive coaches, and we'll pay for their training, almost like a GI Bill for our coaches in town. So we are really trying to do our best to not only build a community of soccer fans, but also try to build the infrastructure it's going to take, because as I said, soccer is growing faster than we can keep up with right now, and we're going to need your support with that. Our revenues currently are not keeping up with expenses. We have about a $200,000 gap between those two things right now. So we are draining our cash reserves rather quickly. So to combat this, the two options for us are either to raise prices to our members, but as a nonprofit, we've tried to keep those as low as we possibly can. So we have a competitive side of our program that is, does cost a few dollars to play. We've tried to keep that recreational side of what we do is less expensive as we possibly can. So as I said, we have about a $200,000 gap in sponsorships and partnerships. We're working very hard, as you guys are, to try to find somebody to put their name on our building, somebody to put their name on our Hall of Fame. Make no mistake, we will take your scraps. If whatever you guys have, anybody you talk to that maybe for some reason can't be a part of what you're doing or is looking for something smaller, we hope to be that option for you too. So we definitely will accept all of your leads. So as I said, our numbers are growing. Soccer is already the area's #1 played sport. We're growing about 20% every program year over year. So when you think about adding, Carrie and I have been with a club continuously now for about 18 months. And in 18 months, we've added 1,000 kids. And so 1,000 kids means we have 50 more coaches. We have that many more referees. We need that much more space to utilize. So we're really running into some capacity issues. We hope to partner with you to achieve a common goal, and that's really to allow every kid in our region that wants to play soccer to be able to play soccer, regardless of income, background, or ability. To do this, we're going to have to work with you to create 1-year plans, 3-year plans, 5-year plans of how we're going to manage this growth. You guys are going to be critical to soccer succeeding in Fargo. We hope your new building will create more capacity. Our concern, because we ran into this in West Fargo, is that often to sustain and to make these new buildings financially successful, they create a lot of internal programming that takes away from the time that we're able to rent it. So right now, we're looking at your building as a long-term solution to our capacity problems. And we're hoping that within a year of moving in there, that we're not already wishing we had more space and a bigger space or a second space. So we'll need your help with that. The biggest immediate problem we have is we don't have anywhere close to the amount of lit soccer fields in Fargo that we need to operate. You keep in mind how short our springs are, the days, and how short the days are in the fall. We can't possibly take the amount of teams that we have playing, the amount of practices that we need to fit in, and squeeze it into a 4 to 6 p.m. time slot. It just can't happen. We only have about 2 lit fields that are available to us now, and we're really honestly desperate to find more lit fields. We're working somewhat with the high schools, but the time we need them is also the time they need their lit fields. So it's not exactly the best solution there either.
Lee, what percentage of your kids play on a full-side field? Yeah, yep. Okay. So you'd have a number of kids that you could throw on a smaller, on one large full-size field and play more than one game, like the younger kids, or you wouldn't ever do that? Yeah, I'm not explaining myself very well. So you have 2 full-size lit fields you can use. And so you would want more full-size lit fields for 11v11 games, not younger kids. Is that what you're?
field to the 11v11 are for the older kids that can start at 8:30. Obviously, we can't start a 10-year-old at 8:30,
Sure.
right? So, but it got challenging for us. We have to, as the rec season goes longer, we have to start shifting the games earlier and earlier, and then we start getting into that 5 o'clock time frame where parents start to revolt and say, I can't get my kid there by 5. But we have to do that in order to get those games done. So it would be nice for us to have a few of the smaller fields that are lit.
Got it. Thank you.
So finally, like, what do we need from you? To be honest, without your continued support, we're going to slowly starve out. We need capacity, and we need your support, and we need affordability of fields. And if not, we'll have to stop accepting new kids, and we don't want to do that either. And we really want every kid that wants to play soccer to be able to play soccer. But if we continue to run into lit field issues and capacity issues, we're going to have to slowly start proactively reducing the amount of kids we have in our program. I will say, without exception, Sean and everybody we work with here is outstanding. You guys have been great allies and great to work with for everything we've done as long as I've been with the club. We're thankful for scheduling priority. That scheduling priority that you give us is critical to what we do. What we really need more than anything is for soccer to be a partnership between Tri-City United and the Park District. And we really need that partnership to include us planning together so that every kid that wants to play soccer can play soccer. And all we really ask is that you don't forget about us. We're not the loudest voice in the building. We're not, I can certainly appreciate what baseball and hockey do for the community, but soccer right now has numbers that love or hate soccer, you have to appreciate. We hope you do. Any other questions?
I have a question for you, Lee. So you'd mentioned working on bringing soccer to low-income neighborhoods. Could you tell us a little bit more about what kind of the work that you're doing there?
Yeah, I probably should have gave you a heads up on that before we decided to start planning this. What we want to do is in spring is we bought a van, a homecoming van, and we're going to turn it into the soccer mobile. So like a bookmobile that used to come around when I was a kid.
Homecoming van.
And
Hilarious.
yeah,
Having a high school senior, that's even funnier.
it won't be Phineas. It was actually curious. I forgot about that. Yes, it won't be Phineas and Ferb when we bring it around. What we want to do is basically create a soccer van. We're going to take our coaches. Our intention is to go to as many parks as we can fit into a summer and just do a 1-hour camp for free for any kid who can ride their bike there. So they don't have to rely on their parents for rides. They don't have to necessarily schedule things too far ahead. What we want to do is do our best to go into especially low-income neighborhoods, especially underserved communities, and try to bring soccer to those communities without it costing them a dime.
Could you enumerate which neighborhoods those are?
I haven't done the research in terms of exactly which neighborhoods, but I mean, I'm certainly played baseball and softball since I was 6 in town, so I'm will hit as many parks as we possibly can. Certainly, with your permission, and we will certainly give you full detail of where we're going to be and when.
Well, I can certainly appreciate that mission you guys have with the van, and you say love or hate soccer, don't forget about us, support us or whatever. It shouldn't be about anybody liking the sport or not liking the sport. At the end of the day, it's physical activity. It's an opportunity for kids to get out of the house and do something other than, social media or video games. And to be fair, we have a lot of new Americans in those very communities that you're speaking of. And a lot of those new Americans are coming from cultures where soccer is sometimes the only sport, let alone the most popular sport. So that's awesome. And I hope we can continue to, to maintain that relationship with you too. I do ask because it, has been a concern in the past in relation to soccer. Is everybody working well organizational wise to try to work together as far as other soccer organizations and stuff go in the community?
Well, Tri-City, as you probably know, is the merger of the two former largest soccer clubs. So as I said, now we probably have about 95% of the soccer players in Fargo are playing for our club. So I certainly, my thinking as a nonprofit is we want the rising tide to raise all boats. We want to build soccer culture and not just our club. And so for that reason, we're certainly not, bending over backwards to support all the other competitive clubs in town. But
Sure.
we certainly don't stand in the way of their success either. And certainly, we have players that sometimes want to move from our club to other clubs too, and we fully support whatever's best for the kid.
So there's other clubs functioning, but you are the ones that are providing the intro to soccer and the development of the soccer, and the other ones are more clubs and, competitive high-level teams in the clubs?
I would say we provide pretty much every possible soccer environment that a kid could play in, from 18 months all the way through high school. Those other clubs have a very small niche. They have 2 teams that play competitively, or they have a very small recreational program or something that they think they can do well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and speaking to your point, we are very aware of our maybe responsibility to the New American community and hopefully helping them some way too. We have a scholarship program, and right now we're self-funding it, which is a part of the reason for that gap I mentioned. But we have about 100 kids in our scholarship program now, and a lot of those kids are New Americans and they can't afford to play, but we're finding ways for them to play. Because we do think it's a great way for them to build friendships, get structure, all the things that every kid needs.
Yeah, I would encourage you to look at other sources for help, governmentally. I don't know if necessarily the park district, but the park district or the city or somebody, because that's for the betterment of our entire community, and that burden shouldn't probably be strictly on you guys, and maybe look at trying to explore some relationships with other governmental entities, whether it's us or the city or others.
Yeah, we've certainly applied for every grant that we can. But as just a little insight, right now, grant applications for a nonprofit grants are going to social causes, and probably rightfully so. Applying for a grant as a soccer club to a grant foundation that provides grants for all different things, we're not real high on the priority list right now in terms of sports as related to social causes and other things. So we're doing our best with grants, and one other thing we're really trying to do related to the New American community is really try to find a bridge between us and that community. It's part of their process of coming here that maybe we can partner with to maybe add a little more gravity to us as a grant applicant. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Let's see what we got here. We are going to have as number 4, the personnel policies. And there are several of them here that are listed on the agenda. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. And as mentioned, we wanted to pull these 6 personnel policies off so we could have individual discussion on each of them. We had a total of 8 of them that we brought to the administration committee meeting back in October. We were able to get through 4 of them and then put the other 4 on the budget facilities committee meeting. And we're able to forward 2 more on to the board meeting. So that gave us that total of 6. So we have 6 of them that we'd like to take individually. And I know some commissioners had some questions on each of them. Stacy Kruger to my right here, our HR manager, is here to assist with questions. And Brock Leitz is also online if he's still there. And we'll try to answer any questions you may have. As I kind of mentioned in some discussion with the commissioners, a lot of these policies were brought forward to the board. A lot of them had to do with just some internal housekeeping, clearing up some of the wording in there that makes our HR department easier to kind of operate through payroll and everything, whether it's holidays, vacation, leave of absence. A couple of them are new, the transgender policy, outside employment, I believe we are cleaning up. And then the social networking policy is also new. So does any commissioners like to speak on any one, or?
Let's start with one of them that you may have heard about that someone would like to speak about or ask questions.
I think Commissioner Ross said you have some questions on maybe policy 105 transgender, and then following that up the outside employment policy.
Yeah, on the transgender policy, under the transitioning employee responsibilities, the first line says, any employee planning a transition should notify the employer at least 60 days prior to the planned transition. And then in the second paragraph, it says the Park District recommends creating a transition plan as part of the transition process. I'm not, I guess I'm not very comfortable with those lines. If I'm an individual that I'm transitioning, is it my responsibility to come in and tell my employer that I'm transitioning? That's concerning to me. I just don't feel, if the employer wants to come in and identify that they're transitioning, that's one thing, but I don't know if we should have it in policy that they should come in and notify their employer. So I'm not comfortable with that language.
With Commissioner Rosted, with that, we do need, HR does need to be notified if they are changing their name or anything like that, so that we could get it changed in payroll, get them, so they know that today they want to be Susie, tomorrow they want to be Bob. They can't just come in and say, now I'm Bob. We need Social Security, we need steps to be taken in order for that change to happen. So that is part of the transition plan that we are looking at. So we're not saying that they have to come in and say, you know, I'm transitioning and voila, you're going to create my plan. We're just trying to be a part of their process so we can make it an easier transition for us at the workplace also.
So other than a name change, if I got married or if a woman gets divorced, they have a name change. We already have a policy for name changes anyway, don't we? Wouldn't that just fall under that? Do we have to have it in a transgender policy?
We could take it out, yeah. It's in the name change policy. Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. Also, it seemed like 60 days ahead of making any kind of a developmental plan seems premature to me. So it seems like 60 days. I don't know. It just, both of the things that Jerry's mentioning here, I think are difficult in terms of the timeline too.
And we have done some research with the transgender community, and they have provided their feedback with this as well. Mr. Gunkelman has also vetted this policy as well. That was just the recommendations we had brought forth. Felt they were good, but we are in agreement if you need those removed.
So I'm assuming we have legal requirements and we're going in this direction because it's something we need to address. And so maybe a little background on where just to help people understand, where did you get, like, how did you develop each of these paragraphs, and, you know, where, I'm just wondering, what
Where'd the timeline
requirement
come
do we have?
Where did the timeline come from? Like how did we establish the days? Was it another policy somewhere? Like
Yes.
Jeff looked at it, somebody else has looked, is there some input from where we got this information?
It was another transition policy that we got from another entity, another park district, not here, Southern United States.
Got it. Sorry, I mean.
If we could soften that language from should to encourage or something, because I just, you know, if I'm just thinking about people that go through transitions, it's not an easy time just because of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
To have this kind of dropped on them, like, now you got to come in and tell your employer that you're transitioning. I get the legal name or change requirements. I completely get that, but it just seems like this is.
If we change the term to.
If the concern is the employee and how they're perceiving this requirement, if we're calling it that, I mean, my thought is after that first sentence, put in there why. I mean, explain the purpose of this is so that the park district can make the necessary legal changes to payroll and other things, and also to support the employee as they're needed, rather than it seeming like someone who's making this change is, well, now I guess I have to do this. And, you know, I think putting a softening second sentence saying, this is why we're doing this, so we can support you in your change. Does that make sense? Or maybe that's further down that
Or we could just say should provide adequate timing to allow for, I mean, we do have what necessary logistics of the transition, but we
Which
could
is
just say
your last sentence.
should provide
Your
adequate
last
time.
sentence kind of covers that, what I'm talking
But
about.
also the
Like,
plan,
yeah.
the
Mhm.
plan, right, involves how they want to go about, I mean, because to protect them, they don't just want to all of a sudden show up a different person the next day and just spring it on everybody. So I think, there's some onus, like there's explanation in this to let them know that we want to help with that transition for not just them, but their relationship with their colleagues and stuff, right? I mean, is that part of that plan, the term plan in there is referring to that? It's not just a matter of cleaning up your name in the computer system, but it's helping you with that transition so that it,
If you want it.
yeah,
If you
if you want it. Yes,
Yeah,
and
that's
that
what-
and you don't have to even worry about whether or not we'd be willing to do it. Like, we're telling you up front that we will do that for you.
Yeah, the whole thing about it's kind of like draconian in a sense to say 60 days, you report here and you tell us what you're doing, and we're trying to make it easier for you. When your colleagues find out about this, it just seems like it's kind of rough and scary. So any language that could kind of make it
Yep.
seem more normal.
That's
And
exactly.
just like every other change that would happen in the district, rather than it being something extraordinary, right?
Yep, that's exactly it.
So do we have a proposal per se of how it would be worded differently at this point?
I didn't have the time to draft something out, but I don't know, Stacy, is that something that we could put this on the table and bring it back next month?
Yeah.
It's nothing too serious, but I would like to soften it to make it look like we're more encouraging to help provide that support if they want it.
We're as
Yeah, and
supportive
I
as
don't-
we can be, right?
I don't
We
even
wanna be
see it
supportive.
as support. To me, it should be just like any other business within the district. It should be just something that you do because you're an employee, and that's it. Why treat it extraordinarily? There could be something else coming along in the future that may be surprising to some, but it may make our decisions at this point seem petty or ill thought. So however that employee is treated should be the same as everyone else.
Moving
So
on.
we can work on softening that language and then run it by Jeff again and maybe bring it back to facilities. Is that where you guys would like to see this brought back next month? Or what would be the best, the path then to get it back in front of you?
Well, admin only meets, a couple times a year, so facilities would probably be the best.
Mhm.
Facilities for approval at the December meeting. So it's still in place in time for the first of the year. That work okay, Stacy?
Okay, and
Yep.
what was the other one?
Thank you. And I think there may have been another question on the outside employment policy 210.
Yep, I got one there. The only question, and it's more of a clarification, an employee shall not accept employment outside of the park district. What about military reserve duty and National Guard duty? I mean, this could be would this prohibit an employee? Because they're protected by law if they have to
So
go.
we have a military leave policy that addresses that military.
So
leave.
this doesn't counter that?
No.
They can mutually coexist?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Commissioner, we've dealt with this in the past with one of our past employees, and he took extensive time off and we were able to work it out with
Okay,
him.
I just
Shiloh.
wanted to make sure that,
Yep, no, that was a good question.
Shiloh, right? Yeah.
so on policy 230, the last paragraph at the bottom of the first page, I'm not exactly sure what we're trying to say here. It says exempt employees are expected to take 4 hours of vacation if they are at the workplace for less than 4 hours on that day. So if I'm at work for 1 hour, I have to take 4 hours? That's what this is saying. I just wonder if I'm not exactly sure what we're trying to say here. Are we saying that if if you leave for a half a day, you have to take a half a day of vacation?
Well, I think the one thing we wanted to look at there was for exempt employees that if you were going to take 4 hours or 4 would be the minimum hours vacation. You know, we always have time where exempt employees may work longer on some days, shorter on other days. So if you say took off 2 hours early on a day, we wouldn't require vacation, providing you've worked that out with your supervisor. But if you're going to take a block of 4 hours or more, we'd ask that you take vacation.
That line just doesn't make, I'm trying to process what it exactly says.
Back in December of 2016, Joel Fettel and Jenny Sauter, the HR director at that time, created this guideline with that exact wording for exempt staff, exempt employees. All we did was take that guideline or procedure and put it into the policy. That was all that I did. I didn't add any more wording. I took exactly the wording that they had created in a guideline. We had exempt staff that were not turning in vacation or sick leave, but they were gone. So they wanted them to be held accountable.
Yeah, I think.
Taking time.
I understand, I think what we're trying to do here, but what it says.
The way the sentence is
The way
worded.
the sentence is
yeah.
written.
So the first sentence, you're trying to say, if you're missing for half the day, more than 3 hours, you should take half a day vacation. If you're missing for the whole day, you should take a whole day of vacation.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you took
Because
6 hours.
the way it's written, exempt employees are expected to take 4 hours of vacation if they're at work less than 4 hours on that day. Well, I could be at work for half an hour and it's saying I take 4 hours of vacation, which doesn't.
That's the way I interpret it, and I struggled with that.
So I don't know if it's. What you're trying to say is if you're not at work the full day, how many hours do they miss and you want them to take vacation is what you're trying to accomplish here. I just think it's worded poorly.
Is it us having language that sets a minimum as Dave was suggesting? So maybe the language gets reworded and says the expectation is exempt employees turn in vacation in a minimum of 4-hour blocks. So 4 is the threshold. I would not expect, as you're saying, if you're there an hour, I would expect that I would be putting in 7 hours of vacation. But I think the trigger is if you're there 6 hours and you've been at a board meeting until 9 o'clock the night before, is the expectation you put in 2 hours of vacation. So is it about setting a minimum threshold? Would that make you more comfortable, Jerry?
Yep.
I think that was intent, so.
Yep. I get the intent, but the way it's worded is.
And of course, the very next sentence says, it doesn't matter how long these board meetings take. It says, this is regardless of how many hours they have worked in that week. So the idea is that you're an exempt employee, you work 8 hours a day, or you take vacation, right? And this first sentence is saying, well, no, you could work 6 or 5, but if you work 4, then you got to take half a day. So which way do we want it?
Set a minimum. I think if we change that to a minimum, I think that works for me.
And we can bring that one back to facilities.
Yep.
Is that enough time to get it for January?
But if you take 4, you're gone, you're gone for 4.
Is there a need for it to happen on the first of the year?
No, but I would like it as soon as possible in the new year because it dictates their vacation carryover at the end of the year. How we changed it to it ends at the 26th payroll, not the end of the year. So I'd like to give our staff at least ample time to know that. So I don't want to be pushing this farther down the road and farther down the road.
Yep.
I'd like it approved as soon as possible, but it will not meet the January deadline.
So Jerry, is it the first sentence of the last paragraph that we could change and it would work?
Yep. Yep.
So
And I
it
like
should
Brock's idea of just putting a minimum.
expected to take 4 hours of vacation if they are at the workplace for a minimum of 6 hours or something. I mean, how do we approve that if don't have the wording in it right now? You need the
Something-
wording done.
Something effective, if you're gonna be gone from work for half a day or 4 hours, you have to take leave. You don't get vacation, you don't get comp time for working the board meeting the last night.
So it could say if you miss more than 2 hours of work, you take half a day of vacation. If you miss more than 4 hours of work, you take a whole day of vacation, something like that.
I think a minimum of 4.
Minimum of 4.
So is it the intention that we have the wording and approve tonight, or was this us rework the wording, bring it to facilities and approve it in December?
Can you utter it right now in a way that Jerry's gonna say that makes sense, let's do it?
Well, my suggestion would be to kind of meet with what Jerry is thinking is something to the extent of the expectation of exempt employees is that they submit vacation in a minimum of 4-hour blocks.
Okay.
Yep.
Can we write that down?
Yeah, I can't repeat it, so I hope somebody wrote it down.
It's recorded.
Well,
Oh, yeah, right.
that first sentence needs to be included in some facet because the second sentence says, hey, if you're not at work at all, you take a full day vacation. We want something that says, this is when you take half a day vacation or
So
4 hours.
pretty much it just needs to be cleaned up. And so if you've got a paragraph to work with, whatever the first line is, everything else needs to be in
But
compliance.
can we get it done in a few minutes? Because it would make Stacy's life a lot better.
Okay,
if we
here's
could just get it
a
done.
question I have. That last paragraph, what was the original last paragraph?
That was added, that was not in, that was the guideline that Joel and
So
Jenny.
that whole paragraph is not in our existing policy. Your concern, your most urgent concern has to do with the second paragraph about leave and our pay periods, right? The crucial timing comes with the second paragraph. The last paragraph we could add in January or at the December meeting. We could take care of those first 3 paragraphs and approve that today. And then we
Well-
can clean up the wording for the last paragraph and add it next month, right?
I would just rather move the whole policy. Yes, instead of
Okay.
approving 3 paragraphs and then bringing another paragraph.
We'll get it
the
cleaned
next
up.
month.
Yeah, that makes
Okay.
sense. Okay, so okay, for Jerry?
One other question, second to last paragraph, it says, it talks about you cannot vacation their way out of retirement. So we're gonna pick on Brian. His last day is December 30th. If he has 40 days of leave, could he put in those 40 days and say, my last day is December 30th, I'll come in on the 30th and punch out? Because I think this leaves us, it says employee's official retirement date is the last day the employee physically works for the park department. So do we have protection so he can't take his 40 days of leave starting next week? And then he's gone until his last day, his retirement date, and then he comes back in, says, hi, I'm here. I just want to make sure we don't have that exposure.
Yeah, and we did discuss this a little bit, I believe, at administration meeting, but if somebody was to take, especially 30 days of vacation, they'd have to get that approved by a supervisor. And I just don't see as that getting approved by anybody. Could they do it? Yeah, but I just don't think it would get the
Okay.
proper approvals.
Let's move on.
All right, so
I-
are there any other of these policies that we need to discuss tonight?
One more.
Oh,
This
okay.
one's real simple. This can be done right now on policy 260. Huh? Policy 260, the last bullet. It starts with an employee. And I think the second line there, it says for their portion. I wonder if there shouldn't be THEY apostrophe RE or no. That's wrong. That's wrong too. There's something wrong with that. For their portion of the total monthly insurance premiums. That's something let's see here. Oh, maybe I'm reading it. I read it wrong earlier.
The last bullet.
Commissioner Rosted, on the vacation policy, Brian did catch exactly what you're bringing up now in that same paragraph we're talking. So perhaps that's where you read that.
Second to last line.
Yeah,
On the vacation?
yes, where it's,
The second to last line on No, leave of absence.
where it says exempt employees are required to take vacation time if they're, THEIR, missing regular, and it should be they are, if, you know,
If they are, yep.
yeah, that might be what you're referring
Yep.
to.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave and
Uh,
Brian.
Yeah, thank you. So anything else here under the policies, the personnel policies that we need to discuss tonight?
Thanks for catching it.
Okay. So let's move on to number 5, board to consider for approval and award construction management at risk services.
Yeah, so.
It sounds like
Move
3 of
on.
them are good to go.
This is,
Yeah,
this is just a miss.
Do you
I,
guys want to
no,
approve?
I think we were ready, but I vibed from Stacy. She wanted to do them all together one time. But if we can pass the 3 we're comfortable
Well, I
with, we
think
can.
she was just talking about the vacation policy, not wanting to approve
Okay.
3 paragraphs of vacation policy.
Okay.
Okay, so the outside employment policy, that was okay once we found out that military is,
Yep.
okay. Social networking. Okay,
Holidays,
Yep.
300.
and holidays, were those,
Leave of absence okay with that? That's okay.
Yep.
So just the
so,
vacation
so
and the
we're looking to approve outside employment, social networking, and leave of absence. Is that right?
Holidays.
holidays.
So shouldn't there be a review of the revisions before we approve?
That, these ones right here are all
Or don't have
approved
any
as presented.
revisions?
The 4 of those 6, Madam President, are all okay. It's the transgender and the vacation policies that we'll bring back in facilities.
All right, so what are you looking to do then? Do you want to approve this tonight?
Move to approve the
Move.
4 as presented.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I
there's my
can, I
motion.
can do that. Oh, you're gonna do that?
Oh,
You already did that?
Done.
I
Second.
saw Gunkel been typing away over there as we listed them all off, so he knows what the motion says. Somebody gonna second?
I'll second, Jeff.
That's good enough for you, Jeff?
Okay, pull the board.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan.
Okay, so are we ready to move on to number 5?
Yes, we are. Thank you, Stacy. Commissioners, at the Facilities Committee meeting, we had brought a recommendation to approve McGough as our Phase 2 construction manager at risk, and we discussed the options that were presented at that time, the savings that could be provided by staying with the same construction manager at risk. We did put out an RFQ for services for Phase 2, and we did have several CMAR firms pick up those proposals. 3 of them did call back. 1 of them did talk with Brock. 2 of them talked to myself. And while they acknowledge that they would love to do work for the Fargo Park District, and this is a great project, they just felt that the advantages that McGough currently has by being on site is a lot to overcome construction-wise and fee-wise. So we did only receive 1 proposal at the time. We did have our interview committee consisting of myself as the owner, Mark Hanze as an architect, Tony Uckel as an engineer, and Cody Baker as a contractor. We did interview McGough and discuss timing, schedules, potential cost savings, general services, and just felt that they didn't just mail it in. They did do a lot of work to put this proposal together and discuss a lot of options that we have if we stuck with them as a construction manager at risk. So we presented that at Facilities Committee meeting. We did ask for direction from the commissioners. Everybody was in attendance. That if you did approve, kind of preliminary approving McGough as a construction manager to allow staff to go back and negotiate with them. We did over the course of the next couple of days. Brock Leitz and myself did discuss with them their fee. Their original construction fee is at 1.9%. We were able to negotiate with them to get them to stay constant with that fee of 1.95%. And then they also have pre-construction services, and this is services related to doing kind of the estimating for the schematic phase, the design phase, as part of the design process. So they play a big part in that of vetting construction costs and allowing us to value engineer the project so it comes in under budget. So we did talk with them. They did concur on those, the pre-construction fee of $98,000 and the CMRA construction fee of 1.95% of total construction costs. So we would ask that the board consider approving McGough as our CMAR as part of phase 2 for the project.
Their discussion.
Was our pre-construction service fee for the original phase?
That's a good question. I think as part of phase 1, they did do a lot of that as part of, can you help me out with that, Oliver?
I think there was a direct payment from Sanford for a portion of that early on, Dave, if I remember correctly.
Oh, I believe so, Brock. Is that correct, Oliver?
And then the second portion was more pro bono.
Yeah, so Sanford covered the cost of the initial pre-construction services to kind of get us to where we needed to be.
Further discussion? Well, if not, let's ask somebody to make a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve and award the CMAR services for phase 2 of the Fargo Parks Sports Complex project to McGough as presented.
Second.
Further discussion?
I'd just like to say thank you, guys. I appreciate working with you up to this point. Appreciate your continuing of the relationship financially. We previously had as a good faith to wanting to see the second phase of the project all the way through, and looking forward to the cost savings that come from the second phase being done, same group. So thank you.
And I would also like to echo that, Commissioner Deutsch. I mean, they have done a lot of, as Brock mentioned, pro bono work and just some of these pre-design phases of helping us out with, you know, some estimates, very high level estimates, but they have helped us get to where we are today. So I appreciate that.
Would you like to poll the board?
Commissioner Hill?
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson?
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch?
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Aye.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, McGough.
To number 6, discuss proposal to purchase assets from Kelly Visto.
Commissioners, thank you very much for allowing us to add this to the agenda tonight. As we have been working through the closing of Legends, we had a meeting with Kelly Visto, who is the owner of Big Herbs and was the previous tenant, on November 4th, where we walked through and looked at all of the equipment and discussed what the Park District owned and what he had purchased during his time there. We discussed if there was an opportunity for us to purchase that equipment, because again, in the tours that we've been giving to potential new tenants, we've had a lot of interest from folks to have a turnkey operation where we would have all of that equipment already in the building. Part of the concerns that possible tenants had were that new equipment is hard to get with the supply chains and those kind of things. And if we want to meet our April 1 deadline, people don't just have this in their garage and they're ready to move it in. And so this last week on November 10th, I spoke with Kelly and asked him for a price for the items that are listed in the packet that I've presented to you today. And he asked for $100,000 for all of the items that are listed there. Then the staff went and looked on website and other web restaurant sources to match up the equipment to see if we would purchase it new, what that value would be. And so on the second page of the packet that I've provided to you, there is that listing of those items and what the total new cost could be Again, it's not exact because we didn't have everything perfect as far as titles and amounts and those kind of things. But again, the staff feels it's a very good estimate of the value if we had asked a new restaurateur to come in and buy it all brand new. And so with that, we wanted to act on this tonight so that I can let potential tenants know that the equipment is or is not going to be available for their use. So when they put their proposal together, which we are asking for them to do in December, so that we can also come to the facilities meeting and potentially in January approve a new tenant arrangement. Unfortunately, this turnaround with Veterans Day and that kind of stuff, we have not had a chance to put the actual paperwork together for this bill of sale. But again, working with legal counsel, they have suggested that if it is meeting the approval of the board, that the motion would make this contingent upon legal counsel drafting the appropriate paperwork so that we can just continue to move forward with this. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Do you know, did Kelly purchase all this equipment new?
Yes.
Or most of it was new?
Yes, when we had an inspection, when we bought the property from Earlene Hector, and going back through those records, the majority of that equipment was end of life and was not kept. There were a couple ice machines that were in good shape, but beyond that, all the stoves, all the other stuff, there were a few other pieces like walk-in coolers and refrigerators that were newly purchased, which again are not on this list because they are staying with the building. They are not contents that you can take with you.
So you were looking for a motion to approve this purchase?
Yes, if we can have that tonight, that will help us continue to move forward with the negotiations that we are looking for a new tenant.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
Well,
Go ahead.
I have some questions.
Go ahead.
Brock, and this is probably a question for you, but do we have any kind of idea ongoing maintenance, or as you, I'm drawing a blank on the term when something amortizes over 5 years, 10 years, you've pretty much end of life it, and so we're going to have to have depreciation. So we're going to need to come up with, what's our ongoing maintenance? All this equipment's got to be 3-4 years old already if it was purchased when Kelly took it over. So I'm just curious what the end of life, maintenance, deferred, all that, what are we looking at?
Yeah, and at some point, I don't have a great answer for what the ongoing, what's the replacement cost at the time that we would do that. But, some of it, as you say, Commissioner Ross said, is maybe 3 years old or better. Some of it's newer than that. It probably was replaced around the time that the transition happened with Legends. I think one of the things we'd want to think about is going forward in a lease, would we expect a new tenant to replace that at their cost at the time that it would need to be replaced? And I think those are questions that would need to be answered when we go through that process with new tenants. Or do we believe it's our responsibility as the owner to continually replace things and keep it at a certain level at our own cost? And Jeff maybe has some insight on that, but I would suggest that we would negotiate with the new tenant that as equipment needs to be replaced, that would be at the tenant's cost. And then, if we end up in this situation again, we could always discuss a purchase of equipment at that time, but it would at least get us a turnkey operation day one with a new tenant.
So let's say we purchase this. What happens if a new tenant says, I don't want any of it? I'm making my, I don't know, I'm making quesadillas and I got 8,000 griddles and I don't need any of this other stuff.
It is our equipment, and in talking with Chad with our concessions, we would continue to find a place to store it, and or we would then sell it outright because, again, we may not have the storage for it.
Mm-hmm.
We could auction it off.
And I think
do we know what a typical tenant, do they want this in there? Do they not want this in there?
Again,
what do
when
we
I've
know?
toured with the current 6 individuals, they have all expressed interest in keeping the equipment that's there. They have said good things about what they see there. It is stuff that they would use, maybe not right away that first season, but they see the value of why it's there. And even if it's something they don't use all 4 ovens, if they use 2, we then have 2 backup in case something goes bad.
And so we would.
And I think that's really the reason we wanted to try to get this on tonight is what we're being told is the more turnkey this can be, the more interest the tenants are having. Because we weren't sure either. We thought maybe people are going to do a whole different product line and none of this was valuable to them. But many of these items are usable regardless of what they do. And I think that's why it became important based on the feedback Carolyn's getting that if it's turnkey, we're much more interested than if we have to start from scratch with everything.
And the expectation would be that we would be able to charge more because we're providing all of the equipment.
Typically, you're going to work that into a lease. Yeah. So let's say hypothetically, if we were going to build a brand new thing, he would work that in. That's all negotiated as part of it. So if they're going to buy their own, then they get to take it, or like we've done that. We buy our own equipment, we take it with us, or if the landlord wants to front that cost, and then typically you're going to spread that out. So we'd want to make sure that that would be then included in the negotiation of the rental rates or things like that too.
And
Just kind of say
preventative
here's-
maintenance schedules and ongoing upkeep. We have a plan for whose responsibility that's going to be.
Well, that's
what
And if
we've done.
something breaks, we're going to replace it for them or?
Well, in the current lease arrangement, it was that the tenant came in and took it as is, and then they basically replaced everything as they needed. And in the case of this, what we had bought from Erlene was not something they could use for very long, if at all. And so they did replace all of it.
Yeah, and I think we'd want to kind of say as is equipment and any maintenance of the equipment. Let's say in 3 years from now, the refrigerator breaks down, then they have to replace that.
Yeah,
Or,
and that's
you know.
currently what we do at Edgewood Tavern as well.
Mhm.
Does this mean going forward that we would be providing equipment, or is it just in this particular case?
I think it is, again, up for negotiations. We would want it to be something that, as much as possible, they are going to replace it as needed. In both arrangements that we have currently, it was that we, the owner, would take care of the roof, the electricity, the gas, the HVAC, and the equipment inside that if you turn it over and shook it out, was theirs to take care of. So like if a toilet breaks, they replace the toilet. But if it's the plumbing in the wall, we take care of it.
So one of the options that didn't, I don't know that was discussed was they want a turnkey, but I didn't hear you say that you asked them if they would want to buy this equipment for $100,000. Did they know that's an option? Is that something they could consider?
When I've talked to them, what they have said is they want to talk to one person. They don't want to negotiate with 3 or 4 or 5 different people to get what this is put together. It is another hoop for them to walk through. Because again, when we first took this over, that was one of the options we had proposed to several of the folks and because I just didn't know. And at this point, again, the reasons that they've given me is that, number one, to get it, they don't necessarily have it in their garage. They're not sure if the supply chains will supply what they need in the time that we need it in. And it's good looking equipment. It's stuff that they would want to use.
So my question, and I fully support that and understand that. So my question then is why are we saying then that we want to set up the same structure? So what they're saying is, so we had our previous 2 tenants working together for the purchase of that equipment because of the fact that we had equipment in there that belonged to the previous tenant. And so what you're saying you're hearing from people is they don't want to be dealing with the 2 previous ago attendants for their equipment. So why are we going to so we're going to do this now, but then we're going to move forward with a plan that's going to create a scenario where if that tenant moves on, that they own the stuff that's in there. And I mean, we would just have to say that if we're going to do it that way, then they're taking their stuff with them when they leave, no matter what, in the future with future tenants.
Right. And I think the other part of this is we're trying to develop a long-term, not a 2-year agreement or a 4-year agreement. We're looking at something long-term. And so with that long-term arrangement, much like we had Mark at Edgewood Tavern, there was that opportunity to have this relationship. And then things did have end of life, and we did have replacement and those kinds of things. Again, if you're not comfortable with this, we won't do it tonight, and we'll have them work directly with someone else. But it is an option, and it would help us meet the deadlines that you have agreed that you'd like to meet with the April 1st opening with the golf.
So maybe Joe's question here, though, I mean, the way I heard it is if we offer them a turnkey operation with ovens, fridges, everything, and say a refrigerator goes down, they would have to replace it, correct?
Right, that's how
And
it's
then
supposed to be
wouldn't
set
that
up.
become, I mean, they couldn't take that with them in the future. That would remain with the restaurant.
We would need to have clarity in the lease for that. And
I think they
again,
have to
He
pay
would
for,
own the equipment.
they would have to
right?
pay for that replacement cost and it would stay with the facility is what I think.
Yep.
Or negotiable.
again, it's how we would
But that's
negotiate.
not the way we
Everything-
had it written with
everything
Kelly
is
originally,
negotiable.
obviously, or we wouldn't be in this situation right now.
Kelly bought all this
And
and
left it
moved it all in.
Yep. And
And
left
if
it
we
behind.
tell him tomorrow it all needs to be out in 30 days,
Yep.
he'll take it all
Yep.
out and nothing will be in there.
So yeah, our option is
We're
we
storing
buy
at
it.
the moment.
Yeah. sorry, Jeff.
And so either we can buy it, a potential
So-
tenant could buy it. I think
I got all that, but what Dave just said,
Oh.
and just to clarify, he just said that if we buy the stuff now, turnkey, a refrigerator goes down, they have to replace that refrigerator, and if they decide to ever walk away from the lease someday, they leave the refrigerator behind, it now becomes Park District property.
Well,
If that's the
that
case,
wouldn't be true
That's-
because
Okay.
at the time that the refrigerator goes down, it's now worthless.
Yes.
And if
But
they were to replace it for $10,000, so traditionally that would not be true unless we were going to buy it.
Yeah,
Okay.
then they would have a roof. So all the equipment would be Fargo Park District, except that refrigerator belongs to that tenant. And when the tenant moves out, they get to bring that refrigerator with
So
them.
what I'm really hearing is this $100,000 is a bridge to offer to a future tenant to help get them in. And then after that, you know, as stuff
I mean,
dies.
so if you have them buy it, if the goal is to get someone in there as quick as possible, your tenant's gonna have to get all this equipment, say buy it from Kelly, they're gonna have to get a liquor license for $60,000. And they're gonna have operational startup for inventory, and product, right? And so by us buying it, I mean, effectively, we're acting as the banker then. And we'll charge more in rent, whether it's just built into their actual rent or whether we differentiate rent on equipment versus rent on space, doesn't really matter. But it maximizes the number of candidates that likely could apply because they're gonna have at least a upfront cost of $100,000
Mhm.
just to get open.
It's a good point. In theory,
It
we
would be
could have a
200,000 if we didn't buy it.
whole new lease. We could have a separate lease just on the equipment if we wanted. I mean, typically you're going to kind of work that into the bigger lease
Yeah.
and just say the space comes with all this equipment and that's why you pay this rate because it's furnished or, you know, it's.
that's good
You-
information, that
Yeah.
we would potentially be charging more than to compensate for the costs of these
Yeah.
pieces of equipment.
Because we're taking the liability, right? Now it's our equipment. And
So
Well, it's our equipment till it dies.
Well, that's.
And then it's-
well, then
That's my
then it's
hangup.
the cities because it goes to landfill, right?
It's, as long as we
No, no,
have
he's
that
saying that the
arrangement.
new piece that goes in becomes the property of that person.
And that's all negotiable, right? Unless we say, no, tell you what, we'll buy a new fridge, you know, however we want to.
I don't know. Yeah, and that's where I fall short because I don't know that we want to be in the restaurant equipment business. But if we use this as a bridge to get a new tenant in, and then as stuff dies out, they replace it on them. I can do that because what we're doing now is just providing a venue to get a tenant in there.
Yeah, and equipment lead times are not, we just finished a project at the brewery and yeah, the exhaust hood was about 6 months behind. So that was part of the reason we're sitting and waiting for a space to open. So I think it's a big, yeah, that's another factor. Like we said, if somebody can come in quickly.
So a question I have is, the previous tenant, the most recent tenant was purchasing this equipment from Kelly. And I'm curious if that's all been resolved. So if we pay and buy this equipment, are we in the middle of a mess?
No, we have there's a court order that the most recent tenant has relinquished any right, any control,
Okay,
any say to the property to,
so we can move forward, make
Yep.
this purchase, and that's all been resolved.
yep.
Correct.
Okay.
Question.
What would be your recommendation?
My outside of doing legal counsel for you guys is I'm drafting, preparing leases like this quite frequently. I think if the goal is to try to maximize the number of candidates that you guys could get to find a long-term fit, this would go a long ways to opening the doors up to more potential operators.
So in other words, we're serving ourselves
Yeah.
by making the purchase.
Well, again, and I'll move to approve this, but I just want to go on record saying, I don't want us to be in the business of owning this equipment. We're just doing this to get the new tenant in, and as stuff dies, it's on them to replace it. If we can agree to that and we can make that work, I'm fine with it. Yeah. So I'll make the motion to approve purchasing this equipment, for $100,000 based on all the exhibits and the line item here, as noted in the, resolution.
And you want that contingent upon the legal counsel drafting the appropriate paperwork?
That too, absolutely.
While we're at it, could we just say that the seller is Big Irv's Bar and Grill LLC?
Yes, and the seller is Big Irv's Bar and Grill, Kelly Visto.
Is there a second?
I think just to be safe, I should abstain from this.
Second.
Your discussion? Hold the board.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that concludes our agenda items for today. Is there anything else that we need to discuss?
Just a reminder for the commissioners at our next board meeting in December, we will follow that up with our park board and foundation social, which will be held at the Elevate event room in the Loretta building, just across west of Broadway Square.
Okay, do we need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So what else?
Bang it.
Okay,
Gavel.
meeting
Boom.
adjourned.
Thank you.